Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. If this is your first time watching or listening to the show, thank you for joining us. Tell a friend. So we went to New York for that Switch event. We talked all about it on the podcast a couple weeks ago. What we didn't talk about was that we were shuffled off to a secret room and Kyle got to play several hours of Breath of the Wild. And then the day after that, we got to interview Anuma, who's the producer for Zelda, and Mr. Miyamoto himself. And we've been carving a whole month of coverage out of it. But
That's right.
Kyle, after playing several hours of Breath of the Wild, biggest takeaway. What'd you think?
Biggest takeaway. The biggest takeaway, I think, would be the challenge. The game was harder than I thought it would be. And maybe it's just a matter of like having played previous Zelda games where I've gotten used to how the combat works, but I was getting killed often. I mean, you guys can kind of confirm that. I died a lot, just kind of exploring the open world.
Oh, yeah.
I was getting hit by enemies that were taking off like 6 hearts at a time. But even just the fact of how much damage enemies were taking is an indicator to me that they're going to be more difficult in general. Like, enemies don't take you on one at a time, which was a big thing about Ocarina, is that enemies, if you met a group of enemies, they would usually take you on one at a time, but that's not the case here.
You say Ocarina. It's interesting. I'm trying to remember with Skyward Sword. They still kind of wait their Z-targeting turn, right?
I think so. Yeah, I just know it started with Ocarina. Like, they actually referenced watching samurai films and how those fights would break down. That was inspiration for how the combat worked in Ocarina of Time.
Yeah.
But like we encountered ice Lizalfos, which are like icy lizard sword.
They like hiding in snow.
That's right. And I was fighting one, and then one just like jumped up out of the snow from behind me and killed me instantly, and did not wait his turn. He didn't look at me. I was like, well, I'll wait till he finishes that fight, and then I'll jump in there. He came in and took off 6 hearts, and I was dead.
The demo that we saw, it certainly had a lot more numbers in it than I was expecting. I think there's going to be a lot more of tracking stats and buffs. Like, you can eat different food, and it'll make you like your stealth abilities better for a certain period of time, or you can withstand the cold for a certain period of time. The UI is a little bit busier than I expected. I guess people have seen the footage that's out there and they have a good idea of what it's going to look like and whatnot. But on the idea of getting better equipment, that was a huge thing. Like, they are very generous with throwing a bunch of different weapons at you all the time. So the way I thought it was that you had to go into the menu and like find the one with the lowest stats. It's just an attack stat. There's like speed and stats, whatnot, but you can like kind of see.
Those are invisible.
Right, but you can kind of get a rough idea. Yeah. But the only number that they show are the attack stats. And I thought you just had to go through the inventory and kind of drop them out manually.
No, but you can it's all like a part of the D-pad. Like, you can quickly flip through weapons and get rid of them quickly too. Like, you actually do twice as much damage as you normally would by throwing a weapon at an enemy. So it is really encouraging you to get rid of your weaker stuff because you're going to do more damage with it. You can throw it at an enemy, do more damage, and then pick up something else without ever having to pause the game, which is nice.
I'm still worried that the equipment breaks on you, but as Hanson said, like, you're constantly getting new stuff. Like, I don't think you're ever going to be in a shortage for weapons. Every enemy you fight has a weapon that he drops and you can pick up and use. Mm-hmm. That might be better. I think it does remind me a little bit of games like Skyrim, but that always has the like little Nintendo touch to it. Where, for example, there was a lightning storm. This really struck me, and like, you can get struck by lightning, right?
It started as a rainstorm and then it turned into a lightning storm, and I had a sword and a shield equipped, and they started sparking on my back, and the lightning was attracted to me and it struck me.
So it's trying to give you a warning that like, hey, if you have steel in the middle of this lightning storm, you need to get it off your body immediately.
You can take it off and throw it at enemies and they'll get hit by lightning, but in my playthrough, I was super struck by lightning and I super died immediately.
Just weird systems. This is very much, JB, why it's up your alley, is it's very much the Far Cry 2 of Legend of Zelda.
All right, I'm there.
It is systems heavy in a really bizarre way. Just like the lightning, like you mentioned, or just little things like there will be a huge snowball rolling down this mountain. And it's like, well, if the enemies happen to be in its path, they'll totally get taken out. And you can see their health go down as they go tumbling down the mountain alongside it. Just so many weird little interactions. Or one little trick they taught us is you have like the stasis ability. So you can like, it's very Dead Space, right? You can like freeze an object. And so you can freeze like a bomb or an explosive barrel and then just go up to it and hack it 1,000 times with your sword. And then when the stasis runs off, it'll go launching. Basically like the home run derby thing in Smash Brothers. Just go launching and explode in a huge way. There's so many weird little physics quirks in this game that more so than I've ever seen in any Nintendo game, for sure.
Yeah, it's clear that they've had a long time to work on the game, and they just kept putting stuff into it. There's like, what else can we do? Let's add this.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of interested about ever since this was revealed, that it's going to be more of an open world, giant kind of game. Is, okay, how are they going to retain the Nintendo polish? Because, when I think of Nintendo games, I think of that polish. I think that's where they sell me on it. Like Fire Emblem, Smash Brothers, everything's finely tuned, everything's fun. Yeah. Even stuff that's, might seem generic. Yeah. There's like some twist to it. So I'm really curious to see how
I think this
pans
is going
out.
to have that as well.
Well, we did actually get an email on that exact point from Justin Moore. He says, "Hey, GI crew, should gamers be tempering their expectations for a flawless Zelda experience? Bethesda is known for huge open world games, and even they can't ship a game where you're not getting stuck in an elevator or glitching through scenery on day one. I know this is Zelda, and I know this is Nintendo, but should the sheer size of this map be a concern? Let's also not forget that the game now has been in development for 2 systems. I know the GI crew has had some hands-on time, but how much of it was just a slice that Nintendo was wanting to show off? I don't remember any big bugs. It wasn't, Link falling through the world. It seems like the game is... basically done based on the build we played. Like, did anything stand out to you as buggy?
I mean, it certainly seems to have that Nintendo polish.
With those many systems interacting, I would imagine there's going to be some funny glitch videos. I mean, it's just a default in the industry these days. But as far as it being like a certain slice of the game, like, it was a certain area of the game, but it was very much a demo and a cover story where it's, hey, we're dropping you off in this pretty harsh environment, go nuts. Right. It wasn't like, hey, don't look over there, walk down this path, don't interact with this thing that way. Like, it was very experimental.
Yeah, they kind of let us do whatever we wanted, and like there was no hiccup, there's no like weird wonky thing going on. Like, I didn't see a bug. I would suspect that fans, if they're worried about it having a lack of polish or being buggy, I don't think it will. I just
it's been delayed for like, it was supposed to, at this point it's 4 years after its like original intended release window. Right. Like they've spent a lot of time cleaning up that game.
The one thing that you might want to worry about a little bit on that front is we don't know exactly what the Wii U version versus the Switch version is going to look like. Maybe there'll be some hiccup in one or the other. We know that resolution's different. It's 720 versus 900 for the resolution. Yeah. And Nate Bildorf, who's in the Treehouse team, who gave us the demo, whatnot for this whole thing, we asked him about, like, are there any differences between Wii U and Switch? And he said, well, mileage may vary, was his response. I was like, okay, that could mean a lot of things, or it could mean nothing.
And Onuma did make a special point to say that the frame rates will be the same.
Just to clarify, because I don't think we stated it earlier, you guys played the Switch version.
We played
correct?
Switch.
We totally did,
with a Pro controller, if you want to get nitty-gritty.
That's true. Which
okay,
we also,
so not the Joy-Cons. Yeah. Just, all right.
I did play with the Joy-Cons separately. For that, the demo that was available at the Switch event where you got to just play the first 20 minutes of the game. I played with the 2 Joy-Cons, and we've talked about this extensively. I actually had a fine time with those, but for our extended gameplay session, we were using the Pro controller.
Okay.
One thing that stood out to me as just being silly and awesome is you were fighting like a giant skeleton creature who kept coming back to life, and you had to like actually kill his, like, crush his skull to finish him off. But there's a very medieval moment where the weapon you're using to fight this giant skeleton creature was the giant skeleton creature's arm.
Yeah. It was, I lopped it off and then picked it up and was using it as a weapon.
That sounds so cool.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
Hey, I don't think we've driven this home. This game seems super, super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's... see, all 3 of you guys are like big Zelda people, right?
I'm not really.
Okay, I'm in the same camp. Like, I played Ocarina. I played the 3DS one that people really liked, and A Link to the Past. And I love all 3 of those. But the other ones, like Skyward Sword or whatever, I couldn't get through.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I've been curious about this one just because it seems like such a different Zelda.
Well, that's the thing. Is like, I'm a big fan of like the classic Zelda formula, but this is so different from that. I was actually nervous, like going into E3 when I saw it at E3. I was like, man, I really want to love this Zelda because it's Zelda, but it looks so different. I'm not sure. But then after we got to play it for this event, like, I think a lot of my fears got put to rest.
Okay.
And, like, I'm actually really excited for it now.
Yeah, it's bold and cool. And again, this might have just been very much the area they showed us and where they put us in the game and whatnot. But it just made me feel, okay, the Dark Souls comparison's done too much. But it made me think of people like Dan Tack or like Matt Burtz in our office here, where it's like, man, those people that used to love Zelda when they were young and now they like a little more hardcore games, maybe even are into Dark Souls. Like, I cannot imagine them, if the entire game is like what we saw, like being disappointed in this. This just seems like that hardcore freeform Zelda experience that they claimed they wanted for so many years.
Mm-hmm.
One thing to point out with what we played, I don't know if we made this clear earlier, like, they weren't builds of the game. Like, someone from Nintendo played the game and created save files for us to jump into.
Yeah.
So
It
they
was
didn't. When we
pretty
say
much final
slice,
game.
it wasn't literally like they took
Yeah.
out a portion of the game and gave it to us. From what I understand, they just gave us the full game and let us start from a specific save point.
For sure.
So
So yeah, playing it and watching it, it made me think this seems like the best possible strategy for Zelda. If it can pull off what I think it's pulling off, this seems awesome. What can go wrong?
Yeah, it's like a fine balance to strike. That you have to do that
Yeah.
to please fans and people like me who are like,
For
maybe,
sure.
yeah.
So I'm a little worried about just the weapon durability thing, about spending a lot of time in your inventory. It seems like a complicated UI systems-wise thing for Nintendo, and they haven't done too much in this vein. So I'm a little worried about there being some annoying hiccups along the way in that front. But again, if this world is actually pulling it off, I think it's going to be amazing.
it seems super dense. There's a lot going on. Like
Right.
we were dropped off. I think it was called Serene Stable is where we started. And we just kind of went north for an hour and a half, and there was tons of stuff happening on the way there. Like the weather changed in ways that Nate, and Nintendo, they were surprised when they were watching us. They're like, "Oh, it started storming. We didn't expect that to happen."
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty dynamic. And I was
Ran into a moose, for Christ's sake.
yeah.
our horse died. I think we all were a little shocked.
Your
when the
horses
horse
can
died.
die.
Yeah.
We they named it Kyle, the horse that is, to try and be cute, and then Kyle took it into combat. And the second it got taken out, it was like a real aggro falling moment from Shadow of the Colossus. It was like, oh god,
We were all stunned.
and the horse's corpse is lying there. This is a Zelda game, for Christ's sake.
Then Kyle tried to eat it,
Yeah.
which was
Well,
just messed up.
No, you
I
can't
mean,
You can't eat
no,
it.
I
You
get
can't
that.
not eat the horse.
But it really-
they should patch that.
It
They should
really
fix
did
that.
surprise. And
That'd
then
be
in
really
that,
good.
if you run into that situation, if you head super north and you're not hitting shrines along the way there, and your horse dies, you walk back. I guess.
Well, there
is
are
some
fast travel points between
but-
shrines.
yeah,
and
Yeah, there's
whatnot.
fast travel,
But
which is
it's-
nice.
Yeah, the weapons durability thing though, that's the thing that's sticking out to me because I can't recall one game with that system where I was like, this makes my experience better.
Yeah.
I can't
I'm curious how it all flows together.
even
Me too.
The Witcher 3, I get why you do that to help, really put you in the shoes of Geralt as sort of this working man who has to upkeep his supplies and whatnot. But even then, it was still annoying. I can't envision an experience with durability for weapons where I'm going, yep, this is good stuff.
It'll certainly add to variety. I mean, the different weapons that we encountered along the way, it's going to make for a different experience instead of just, hey, I have
Yeah.
Link's sword moving forward.
I almost wonder if their approach is kind of like the same thing that Halo sort of takes to its weapons, where it wants you to constantly be picking up
Yep.
things and trying new things.
Totally.
You're going to run out of ammo on this because we want you to start using this. I wonder if that's their goal. I don't know if I like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I like it in Halo that much, which is kind of a strange line to
Yeah.
draw. But
Mhm.
Thinking
We'll
about
see-
it in
yeah.
those terms, I'm kind of like, okay, well, I guess I do that in other types of games. So maybe it's not that bad. It's just you're used to having this one type of thing in
Yeah.
Zelda or these kinds of games.
because even in that play session, what I ended up doing was using my weakest weapons first. That one does a lot of damage. I'm going to just keep that one if I run into something big
Yeah.
later.
Yeah.
I
So-
imagine I'll probably just use my second strongest weapon the whole
Exactly,
game. And
yeah.
once I finally get something more powerful than that, I'll switch over. But anyway,
And then that calls into question, what is the
Yeah.
Master Sword in the game? Is it?
it's-
We've
Yeah,
asked
they
them
were
about
really
it.
Can it be
cute
repaired
about
or
that.
something?
weren't
Yeah, they
Yeah.
said it's we asked them about it, and they're like, it's a mystery.
Hey, it's on the cover of Game Informer.
That's
It's
true,
going
yeah.
to be in the game.
you're
But
probably
at
going
what
to get it for
capacity,
the
though?
last 10 minutes or something.
Yeah.
It'd be like a gravity
Oh, it'd
gun.
be like the gravity gun. Yep.
Something. So Nate Beldorf, again, who's with Treehouse, who's guiding
Do you want to
us along
explain
the way.
who he is? Just real quickly, he was.
Yeah, he's the Cream Dream Thrill of a Lifetime. He's the guy who wrote Paper Mario, or localized
Yes,
Paper
yeah,
Mario,
it's
to be
translated,
fair.
yeah.
So it was fantastic because
Yeah, he was great.
We were sitting out by some food, getting ready to do this demo, and I saw him walk by, and I recognized him because I'm a Paper Mario nut. It's like, oh my god, that's the guy that works in Treehouse.
And you yelled at him about Color Splash for an hour.
Hanson
No,
got
I
on
did not.
Twitter
He
page.
did.
It was kinda
I did
interesting.
not. But it just immediately was like, oh my god, can I shake your hand, Nate? Oh my god, you wrote Paper Mario. I love those games so much. And then I was like, hey, can we get a picture? He's like, oh, we're going to be spending the rest of the day with you guys as you play Zelda. Like, I'm actually your tour guide in there. I was like, oh my god, okay, great.
That was awesome.
Then you jumped into his arms.
And he carried
Cradled
me
like a
away.
baby.
You guys
And
went
he
and got married.
Whispered sweet nothings about Rock Hawk along the way from Thousand Year Door. What the hell where was I going with that?
I don't remember.
You were
now,
just
sorry.
explaining who
Oh,
Nate is.
he said, and he's trained, but we asked him about weapon durability, and he said he did not find, he's played through the game several times at this point. He said, there's no ideal path. It's unbelievably freeform, all this stuff. That is great to hear. But he said that at no point did he find a weapon that
An invincible weapon.
That's
I think is
right.
our wording that we asked him.
it sounded sincere. it didn't seem like he was cagey trying to talk around the Master Sword. So that adds to my confusion. But maybe he is just really good at his job and it's imperceptible.
Right.
But he did tell us that
Yep.
every weapon can degrade.
So Kyle, how many pots are out there in the wilderness in Breath of?
I didn't
Boy.
see any.
Yeah, I didn't see
Did
any
you?
pots.
Does Link go? Yeah.
Believe so. You can
does.
cut grass, but it does not reward you anything.
Yeah, there's no hearts, no.
Wow.
You
Oh,
don't get hearts from
rupees in there.
grass. Yeah.
Wow.
It's diabolical. There's no little cutscene, no da-da-da-da-da-da-da when you're opening a chest.
If
That's
you
gone.
if you kick a small chest and you're not wearing shoes, Link will say "ouch."
He'll,
and
he'll
hold
do
his-
the cartoon thing where he's
Yeah.
hopping.
The animation in that game is stunning. Like just
It's
his
amazing.
little movements, because you can go in the pause menu and see how he's reacting to things. And like when he's cold, he's shivering. It's so
Yeah,
cool.
it's really
He looks so
I
good.
mean, it looks really good.
Yeah.
Like, just it reminds me a little bit of Wind Waker. Like how is it cell shaded?
It's like slightly.
It's dancing with it. There are like Wind Waker touches even where when it's cold out and he's breathing heavily, like the breath that comes out of his mouth, the wild stuff itself, it kind of has like this spiral artistic swirl to it, a little bit like a
Oh.
Wind Waker explosion look.
Right.
Yeah, Nintendo's always been good at like just art design, and I think art style really shines, even though visually maybe it doesn't look as polished as like The Witcher, let's say.
Yeah.
Like-
Sure.
Well, it doesn't look as photoreal as the
Yeah,
Witcher.
yeah,
I really like
photorealistic,
the way it
but
looks,
like the
yeah.
art
Yeah,
design, art
artistically.
style is so cool
Yeah.
that you're like, you don't even care.
Yeah. I felt that way about for the brief time I owned a Wii U. Any Nintendo developed game I had, it might not have like looked amazing technically, but the art style was so good.
Yeah,
it didn't
Color
matter.
Splash, as controversial as that game is, one of the best looking games I've ever played. I will always argue that. That game is amazing. Jerry wrote in. We got a couple people asking Zelda questions. You guys ready for that?
Yeah.
Good old Jerry wrote in and said, "Hey, Hanson and crew. The last two Zelda games, Skyward Sword and Link Between Worlds, I think have done the best job presenting the main story. Yet one thing I want in a Zelda game that has not been present so far is meaningful character development side missions, like The Witcher 3 brings up. How do you guys think the storytelling will be affected in Breath of the Wild with the game being open world?"
I don't know.
What do we see of the story, Kyle?
Not even outside of our play session, we've seen Link wake up from like a 100-year nap. We've heard Zelda speak a little bit. We've interacted with a couple characters. The most information that we have to answer that question probably comes from talking with Onuma about how the story is going to unfold in the game.
Right.
And he was very mysterious about it. It's some weird idea that he had apparently 20 years ago when he first started making Zelda that he's been sort of thinking about, that he's now integrated into this game. It seems like you can look in the menus and see what appears to be like maybe you can fill out with story moments or something like that.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay.
Yeah, and it looks like maybe you'll like run into people and you'll get side quests or something, but this is all unconfirmed. This is just me speculating.
Well, we didn't
It's-
really see side quests though.
we
we
didn't-
didn't.
yeah.
I mean, we talked to a character named Sprin, I think, at the stable and whatnot, but it was just a
Yeah.
normal Zelda character, was not voiced. Seems like voiced characters and actors, that's just for the cutscenes, but we didn't see any in, a couple hours of playing in the area that we were. There were certainly moments where we're about to activate a button or do something, and then Nintendo's like, don't, that's off limits for now. So assuming that would have triggered some cutscene.
All that one small thing is the character there's a lot of stables around where you can kind of store your horses. The person who runs the stable is a distinct named character. So
Right.
I think you're not going to see a lot. I don't think characters are going to feel randomized, because sometimes you'll just see NPCs that feel kind of random.
Yeah.
We'll see about that, because we only saw a couple people, but they all seem distinct and they all seem to have names. And they did say things,
We do have a video coming up soon on the website that's with Miyamoto and Onuma talking about storytelling in Breath of the Wild, so I might answer some of Jerry's questions. But it is just a cagey thing where they say you can go through the game and completely skip the story. Everybody's going to have different bullet points of the story that they get, and somehow it's all going to feel organic, is the word they used.
So we're talking about like Memento style thing where everything's
I don't
out of
know about
order.
that.
No. I just think I don't know what's going to trigger.
you start the game saving Zelda and then you go backwards from there.
I just certain areas in theory will trigger certain story moments, but it'll make sense even if you only hit a certain fraction of those. That's where it gets confusing. I
Yeah,
really want
I
to see
don't
because
know.
it's. I mean, we asked the direct question in the video coming up, but that trailer. I mean, there's like real heavy cutscenes where it's Zelda crying, and combined with the demo that we had, which was so free form, I don't know how you mash those two together in a way that feels organic.
If
But
they're not going to direct you towards anything on the map, like that does sound really hard to
Yeah.
like convey a logical story
Yeah.
with flow, unless it's just like I don't know. It's all told in flashbacks or something. Like you get to a point and then it flashes back.
That's actually an interesting idea because since you start the game waking up from a 100-year nap,
Right.
maybe you see the things that led up to Link going to sleep. Or something.
Well, we do know a couple cryptic things about the story that I guess we haven't talked about yet, right? Like there is some narrator talking to you, including throughout the dungeon, and the narrator made some wing puns and some bird-based puns. So maybe it's just this one dungeon, maybe it's the entire game. You have this narrator working with you, but nowhere to be seen. But there is some sort of VO from this.
While we were playing through the dungeon, someone was talking.
You think that's a callback to Skyward Sword?
I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, there is like a flying bird character in the trailer, and so maybe it's the same one. We're not sure. But then also in the dungeon, which we should probably talk about in a little bit here, there is what they call malice.
Yes.
Right, which is kind of like some Jabu style
It's like
corruption.
goop. Poison that kind of is on the floor. Has little eyeballs coming out of it that you have to shoot with your arrow.
Evil Ganon-y type stuff.
Some real gross stuff.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, they did say that this takes place after Wind Waker, right? Is that right?
No, they did say Ocarina of Time, which is in our 51 questions for Miyamoto and Eiji Onuma, which you should check out on the website. It's fantastic.
Yeah, if you just listen to the podcast, we posted this rapid fire video interview with Ben Reeves talking to Miyamoto and Onuma on the website on Wednesday. You can dig it up and find it, but it is an absurdly good time to watch.
Right.
But there is, in response to Wind Waker, there are a lot of fan theories going around talking about that they think it takes place after Wind Waker, but nothing official from Nintendo.
Which is interesting because Wind Waker is pretty late in the timeline, so to speak.
Yeah.
So anyway, just an interesting aside for all you timeline nerds.
Yeah.
I'm one of those.
Hey, Kyle.
Hello.
Michael from St. Paul writes in. He says, "Hey, GI crew, in Breath of the Wild, do you have an idea of the balance between traditional dungeons and the smaller shrines? Nintendo has said there will be traditional dungeons, but have said almost nothing beyond that. Are they still as big of a part of the game as previous Zelda games? Why haven't we heard about them?" And before you answer this, wonderful question from Michael from St. Paul. You had an interesting analogy about the shrines. It reminded you of
Batman Arkham Riddler puzzles.
in Arkham Knight.
Yeah. Find...
So please explain.
Yeah, you find shrines everywhere, and you go into them, and they're basically like, maybe you could say a room or two of a standard dungeon. Like you just solve one big puzzle or maybe two big puzzles
They're
to
little
get through
test
them.
chambers, yeah.
Yeah, and they reminded me of Riddler puzzles in the sense that they are literally puzzles that are kind of distributed throughout the world, which I'm a big fan of. I really like the idea of them breaking apart little Zelda puzzles and distributing them everywhere. I think that's going to be really cool.
I like that comparison. I will say in like Batman, they're integrated into the world a little bit more, whereas the shrines you kind of go in and it's separated
it's a
from the world.
standalone thing.
Although it is a bite-sized puzzle basically. Which is kind of cool because it's like the team just went and go make a bunch of puzzles, and so it doesn't really matter how they fit into the world. Like we can put it wherever we want.
Yeah.
So is it kind of like the Tomb Raider stuff and the newest Tomb Raider where you just find tombs and you go solve them?
It is like that, except like even those tombs are maybe more elaborate than some of these shrines.
And so there is a little confusion about it, but those are the 100 little shrines. But then there are big classic Zelda dungeons, which we played through one of them.
Yes.
Which have floors, and it's like a bigger area and multiple.
They are smaller, I would say, than recent dungeons. I've been playing Twilight Princess.
The one we played was, at least.
That's true. Yeah, we don't know about the other dungeons, but the one we played felt small compared to a standard Twilight Princess or Skyward Sword dungeon.
Sure.
I mean, it didn't strike me that way. As not the biggest Zelda fan, I didn't leave thinking that was a little short.
It didn't seem like... I mean, it seemed maybe comparable with Ocarina's dungeon size. Would you compare it to that?
Maybe some of the earlier ones, because they get bigger as you go on. But like the first three Ocarina... I mean... Like I said, I'm literally playing Twilight Princess now, so maybe I have a better sense of like where I can compare them. It felt smaller. I got through it faster than I can get through a Twilight Princess dungeon.
Still tricky.
Yes, yeah.
It's still a dungeon though. It still has that feel. It's still like multiple challenging
They didn't pitch
puzzles
it
and all that stuff.
and
it was cool.
Yeah, they didn't pitch it as the Wind dungeon, but the puzzles were Wind based.
Right.
So
So
it
you were like
certainly
closing
seemed that
vents
way.
and stuff like that.
Well, it was cool because you could like rotate the whole dungeon and like move it around.
Right.
And so the direction that the dungeon is turned, let's say, affects certain puzzles and stuff, and you solve puzzles in different rooms.
It was
based
a
on how it's
funky
turned.
dungeon,
which
for
is
sure.
which is funny to call back just a minute ago. There's actually, remember in Batman Arkham Knight, the what's it called, the dirigible?
Yeah.
That you could actually tilt.
Right.
It actually kind of reminded me of that.
This game is basically just a reskin of Batman.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, Jerry, have we made that clear? Have we been doing a bad
Oh,
job? It is
man.
just Arkham Knight.
Yeah.
We've been trying to tell you.
So this is the story of how Link dies then.
That's right.
We did ask Onuma about the dungeons, and he said that they were kind of intentionally less complicated because they're sort of offloading the puzzles, it seems, to those shrines. So you're still going to get the same amount. It seems probably more puzzle that you would in a Zelda game thanks to the shrines. But the dungeon we played it just felt like a little smaller to me.
Yeah.
The
I will say, as like, dungeons were always my favorite part of a Zelda game, and so when we saw this dungeon, I was a little bit relieved. I'm like, finally, you get to see like these things are actually in the game, and I was happy to see it, even though, like you're saying, it's smaller. Like,
It was still a lot of fun. Yeah, I don't want to
it's
diminish
a lot
it.
of fun.
It
Like,
was
the dungeon
cool.
we saw was one of the coolest parts of our demo.
Yes,
it's nice that
absolutely.
Zelda is hiding the dungeon aspect, I think, to some extent, because as we learned with the cover reveal, people are very sensitive to spoilers.
Yeah.
You say the name of the boss at the end of the dungeon. It's not the final boss, not the final dungeon, but it seemed like there was a strong community on the internet that considered a screenshot of that boss, even the name of that boss, to be a spoiler.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I guess I thought that we played a lot of Zelda. We played more of Zelda than anyone outside of Nintendo at this point, and I still don't think we've seen very much of that game overall.
For sure.
So I'm absolutely sensitive to spoilers myself. I get that complaint, but just know that was a very small part of Breath of the Wild.
I don't think it's as big of a deal as maybe some people think it might be.
I think
either.
so, too.
Yeah, that's
like
the
when
other
you
thing,
actually see
yeah.
that in a game, you'll be like, okay, I didn't think that. I thought it was more than that.
Yeah. One other quick thing on the dungeon front, too, is Mr. Bildorf giving us a demo and whatnot. He framed an interesting way where he said, like, you'll have a lot of responsibility in this game. Like, if you need an item and you go into this dungeon and you run out of those items in your inventory, there's not going to be a machine popping out an infinite amount of those items next to you. Like, you need to go back to the world map, make sure you're fully stocked up, make sure you're fully ready to go. And that also carries over to, like, fighting the Guardians, right?
Yeah.
Which are huge robotic creatures, well, large robotic creatures that seem unbelievably tough. And
Yeah.
it's just like, hey, you need to be stocked up and ready to go to take these guys on.
That's the one that smashed you to pieces, right?
Oh yeah,
Kyle?
big time. That was the one where I was like, I want to keep playing. I don't want to stop playing Zelda. And they were like, look, you're not going to beat this thing. Please give us the controller back. And I was like, no, I don't want to leave. I just want to move in here and keep playing Zelda, please.
And then you tried to run out the door with the Switch.
Yeah,
It
Nate was
embarrassing.
mad about that.
We should point out that on that Switch where we're playing Zelda, we tried pressing every button on the
That's
controller
right.
to, like, bring up UI or anything.
Yeah, the screenshot
Also,
button, the menu button. I tried to immediately, first thing I did was try to press all those buttons.
You made it seem like you're trying to play Zelda with the screenshot button. Oh, is this the arrow button here? What's going on?
Oh, what do I do?
So Don Heikert from St. Louis Park, Minnesota writes in and he says, hey, Ben and Game Former crew, hello. How's the soundtrack for Breath of the Wild and the sounds of the game? Is the music up to snuff? Also, how are the environmental sounds? Can you hear critters, bugs, wind, etc.? All those sounds really make a difference in pulling a player into the world. Thanks again for such a great show each week. Thank you. What do you guys think of the soundtrack?
It didn't stand out to me a ton, for better or worse. I think maybe it's intentionally quiet to represent a natural world, but
It's subdued.
I will say
yeah.
the sound effects in the world seemed good.
yeah.
You know, there's part of mechanic where, like, you can sneak through enemy bases, you can sneak up on enemies. So
Yeah.
when you're doing that, you kind of hear the wind, you hear yourself like walking up, sneaking on them. The music though, yeah, it didn't. I'm sure it'll be good, but it wasn't something that I took note of.
So they
Yeah.
were cagey when we asked about the composers for this game. The internet, and I don't know at what point it came out, but the internet certainly seems locked that it's this person named Manaka Kataoka. I'm sorry, I probably butchered that.
Waka waka.
But they actually composed. They composed.
You guys should see this look that JV just
Come
gave me. It's
on.
the sweetest, kindest.
But they helped compose Spirit Tracks, which
Okay.
the overworld theme in Spirit Tracks, wildly underrated for
Yeah,
Zelda
I
songs.
like the music in Spirit Tracks.
Also, Animal Crossing New Leaf, which has a fine soundtrack.
That's a good soundtrack.
So the main theme for Breath of the Wild, it has a very Ghibli vibe to it. Did you
the
notice that as
whole
well,
game
Kyle?
does.
That's
really
interesting because like the
does.
visuals remind me of Ghibli
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. Actually,
They've always drawn on Ghibli for sure.
let's listen to a little bit of that main theme here. So it goes on and builds from there. I'm sure you've heard that cue
Yeah,
a
that was
lot.
right.
That was just music from Spirited Away, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's just the full Spirited Away.
It's the
soundtrack.
piano work. That's what it is, right?
Yeah.
The most striking music that I heard a lot during our time playing is just
ba wata ba da bang da bang. You were playing that nonstop during the interviews.
I was so bored.
Oh my
Miyamoto,
gosh.
ba beep, ba beep, ba beep.
Have you heard of Kid Rock? No?
Oh, Skull Kid Rock. But there is this weird piano music that plays when you're just kind of exploring the world.
Yeah.
And Wade in the booth, you want to pipe that in here? It's just exploration. Should be the second track here. This is obviously a horse that
Okay.
you're manning. It's from gameplay, but just listen to the piano in the back. Jamie, nothing funny about it.
Oh,
It sounds lewd.
I'm gonna go that route, Jamie. Anyways, just bizarre, random kind of chirps from a piano, but it was very present.
I like it. It kind of makes me
Really
it makes me
subtle.
it makes me think of the word digital comes to mind. It seems like there's like this electronic, almost science fiction-y undertone to the whole game, and like
Yeah.
that theme. I remember seeing that approaching the Guardian and seeing that Guardian walking around and hearing the little tinkling on the piano. It just makes
I
me.
didn't connect
it's
that
kind
in
of
my mind, yeah.
electronic. It just there's something digital about this
sure.
game that I don't know what it
There's
is
this
yet.
certain sci-fi-ness
Yeah.
more so than any
I mean,
Zelda.
you're carrying around an iPad pretty much. Like it's so I'm
Right,
curious to
right.
see because they went a little science fiction-y later in Skyward Sword, and I really liked it.
Yeah.
And I would like to see them because the original idea for Zelda was that like Link goes into a computer. That was like the original
What?
idea. Yeah, and
Is
like
that
you were
right?
like dealing with computer chips and stuff like that. Like dungeons were like going into computers, but they changed that to be like more like fantasy. So I wonder if that's kind of like Miyamoto sort of finally looping around to maybe kind of play with that idea a little bit.
It's
I don't
like
know.
a little bit of that Star Wars strategy of like using some of George Lucas's ideas from
Yeah.
1975 now.
And I mean,
Yeah.
there's the very first reveal for it. Link had that like weird lightsaber thing, and we encountered a Guardian that dropped a spear that was tipped with that electronic
That's right.
thing. So I'm really curious to learn more about what that is.
Yeah. Do you guys want to hear one more track from the game?
Yeah.
So this is around Serene Stable, which is an area that only we've seen. We have some footage of coming up soon on the site and whatnot. But here's the music when you're walking up to the stable, just for a nice palate cleanser here. Some good, peaceful, classic sounding Zelda. And you're talking to this lovely guy, what the UI sound is. And there's some good old Zelda sounds.
This
Yeah.
reminds
like-
me of the Twilight Princess a little bit.
Yeah, I can see that.
The
And like
homestead
Kakariko
music.
Village and
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, I love that little Zelda because it just gives a little bit of character without having to give them a full voice.
Yeah, I want to see like how big a sound library is
Yeah.
for the NPCs, like just how many grunts and random sounds there are.
Just
I'm
like
recording
who
all
does the Zelda voice and what was that recording session like?
don't
It
know.
was
The
like,
actual
how long
Zelda
did it
voice.
well, sorry, I meant Link.
Oh,
yeah,
I see.
but the Zelda one would be interesting too because she actually has real dialogue.
Yeah, and there was not a hint of Zelda
Yeah, we
in,
didn't see
in the extended demo.
We
that
we
played
talked to
on that.
him about Zelda a little bit.
Yeah.
Which like you'll see in our cover story. But as far as our playtime, we didn't see her, didn't interact with her in any way.
Yeah. Overall, I came out of that thing like, man, I cannot wait. And I just love this bold new approach for Zelda. And I'm there has to be a downside, and I'm not certain what it is yet. But I think that's just the pessimist in me looking
Sure.
at this because like this seems like what people have been asking for a long time.
I as a like me and Reeves, I think are both big like old school Zelda fans. Like we like big dungeons and stuff like that. I'd worry about just my personal like I wish I could spend more time in dungeons or something like that. But
yeah.
man, we'll see.
I'm worried if, like we said earlier, if the story's going to string together well. I'm worried about the combat a little bit with those the weapons and breakable weapons. But
Sure.
I mean, everything else like sounds so good. Looks so it's a beautiful looking game, obviously, and it seems fun to explore that world.
Yeah.
So, you know what? I'm in.
I
for
can't
sure.
wait.
I had problems with Skyward Sword too, but I still had fun with it. So it looks more promising than that game to me.
I am way more excited about this than I was Skyward Sword
Yeah.
for sure. Like
Yeah.
this is like I would say Twilight Princess is probably the one that I was anticipating the most, and this is like up there with that. Like I cannot wait to play more of this game.
Thank you so much for watching this excerpt from the Game Informer Show podcast. You can click right here if you want to subscribe and listen to the audio version of the full show. Full episodes air every Thursday, and they feature Game Informer editors sitting around talking about the biggest reviews, previews. We talk about exclusive impressions of Game Informer's cover stories. We have long-form developer interviews, everything that's great in gaming. So every Thursday, be sure to check it out.